August 2018. Two vehicles heading north on the M6. One of them carried nearly 200 kilos of pure cocaine, packed tight beneath a false floor in the back of a van. When police shut down the motorway near Knutsford and boxed them in, it sparked headlines across the country. The drugs were worth over £20 million. It was the largest land-based cocaine seizure in British history. But that wasn't the start of the story. The real collapse began weeks earlier, quietly, in a rented living room in Warrington. The camera was recording. Two men were laughing. Bundles of cash were laid across the table like poker chips. Over £150,000 in notes. Rolex watches. A money-counting machine buzzing in the background. It was supposed to be private. But what that single video exposed wasn't just arrogance. It revealed the map to an empire. A network that stretched from Merseyside to London. 3 interconnected crews, each running their own operation but all feeding the same pipeline. The dealers, the transporters, the suppliers. And at the center of it all, a man nicknamed Alvin. He didn't need a gun to control a city. Just a phone, a car, and a promise. But that promise was built on credit. And by the time the drugs hit the road, he owed the wrong people millions. So how did one careless moment pull the curtain back on an empire that thought it was invisible? And why did that video matter more than any phone tap, any raid, or any wire? To understand that, we have to go back to where it all began. And what was really hiding behind the tinted windows and showroom smiles in Warrington. Before his name was whispered in courtrooms and encoded in encrypted chats, Jamie Oldroyd was just a young guy from Warrington with slick hair, sharp trainers, and a taste for speed. To most people who saw him on the street, he looked like the type who sold cars, not cocaine. And that was exactly the plan. He registered a business, Pro Lease Vehicle Hire, a polished front offering luxury cars to footballers, influencers, and weekend show-offs. His paperwork looked clean. His Instagram? Even cleaner. But behind the smile and spotless Otis, Jamie was building something bigger. Much bigger. By the time police even knew his name, he was already operating more than 17 different vehicles. Not as a fleet, but as moving pieces in a drug network that stretched from Manchester to London, Carlisle to Darlington. Each car had a purpose. Some were stash rides. Others were clean lookouts. A few were just decoys. All of them in some way were part of a growing web of movement, exchange, and secrecy. He didn't handle the drugs directly. That would have made him too easy to trace. Instead, he built layers, couriers, safehouse runners, pickup teams. A multi-tier setup that allowed him to stay above the risk while keeping his hands on the controls. Oldroyd understood one thing well. In this business, perception is protection. And for a while it worked. To the world he was a businessman. To his crew he was the boss. But beneath the polish the pressure was building. Because the more cars he added, the more people he had to trust. And trust, in the drug world, is a currency that runs out fast. And that would lead to a mistake. A costly one. One that didn't involve drugs or guns or getaway cars, but something far simpler. A single reckless flex. And what that revealed, we'll get to in just a moment. Jamie Oldroyd didn't build an empire alone. What made his operation different wasn't just the weight he was moving, it was how many people he got to carry it for him. At the center there was Oldroyd, never too close to the product but always close to the profit. Around him, a circle of loyal runners, stashmen, and suppliers moved like parts in a machine. Each had a role. Each had a code name. And most of them didn't know what the others were doing. Paul Ferraiolo was one of the flashiest. Known for his links to gangs in Merseyside and his love for fast cars, Paul wasn't subtle. He drove a Ferrari and a Lamborghini like they were taxis. But his real value came from what he could source, kilos at a time, no questions asked. Moses Weber made sure the logistics worked. He was the middleman's middleman, coordinating who picked up, who dropped off, and where. The fewer mistakes, the safer the run. And Moses rarely made mistakes. Lewis Johnson ran the Liverpool Road safehouse. On the outside it looked like any rented home. On the inside it was a rotating vault, bricks of cocaine in, cash out. It was under his watch that some of the most important handoffs happened. Callum Vooz stashed drugs at his grandmother's house in Birchwood. A quiet street. A modest home. Not the place you'd expect to hide thousands of pounds in powder, but that was the point. Then there was Joel Reading who brought it to the street. He didn't just move product. He watched who was buying, who was asking questions, who needed to be told to look the other way. And from the car wash in Birchwood, Talent Paja and Islam Grena, 2 Albanian nationals, moved packages and cleaned cars, sometimes at the same time. It was Grena's phone, in fact, that would later hold the video that blew the lid off everything. But we'll get to that. Outside of Warrington, Oldroyd's reach kept spreading. In Carlisle, Dean English ran the northern line. In Sussex, Ryan Quinnell and Jordan Red kept the southern end moving. Together, this group created a chain that moved silently across the UK, link by link, town by town. They never stayed in one place too long. Cars were swapped. Phones were thrown away. Conversations moved to encrypted apps. No names. No numbers. No patterns. Even their drugs weren't local. Oldroyd sourced his product from Manchester and Liverpool, and moved it outward: London, Darlington, Carlisle, Scunthorpe. The further it traveled, the more money it made. But even with all these layers, one thing never changed. The entire network depended on silence. No one bragged. No one filmed. No one slipped. Until someone did. And what that video exposed would turn the whole operation inside out. While Jamie Oldroyd ran things on the ground, someone else was moving in the shadows. Quieter. Calmer. But just as dangerous. His name was Jamie Simpson, and he didn't look like a kingpin. To his neighbors, he ran a bouncy castle business. To his clients, he was the guy who set up weekend parties for kids. But behind the inflatables and booking sheets was a different kind of logistics operation. One that didn't deliver balloons but bricks. Simpson didn't flood the streets. He moved the big loads. He didn't need to make calls or count stacks on camera. His job was movement. He was the one who orchestrated the £20 million run from Kent to Warrington, the shipment that would go on to become the biggest land-based cocaine bust in UK history. But even a clean machine needs people to keep it running. And Simpson had his own crew. Claire Smith, his partner, was more than just along for the ride. She handled trips across the country, Scotland, the South, and everywhere in between. Every job? £3,000 in cash. On the surface, she looked like someone heading to visit family. But in the boot? Kilos. Her fiancé, Jamie Winterburn, helped behind the scenes. He didn't touch the packages. But £21,000 in dirty money quietly moved through his account, covering the trail no one else could afford to leave. Then there was Andrew Daniels, the man who drove the van on the day everything fell apart. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a guy with a drinking problem. On the return trip from Kent, he cracked open cans of Strongbow in the van carrying nearly 200 kilos of coke. By the time police pulled him out, he had soiled himself. He didn't run. He didn't fight. Because deep down he knew this was the end. And finally, Dean Brettle. Not flashy. Not loud. But the one who helped load the hidden compartments. Steel drawers. False floors. His job was to make sure the van passed any quick check without a second glance. Together, this crew operated like a clean handoff system. No drama, no attention, just supply and delivery. But even they couldn't stop what was coming. Because what Jamie Simpson didn't know was that his operation, and his freedom, had already been compromised. Not by an undercover cop. Not by a failed run. But by a single clip. A video that didn't even show his face. But would soon seal his fate. August 2, 2018. Just before sunset. Two vehicles moved steadily up the M6 near Knutsford. One playing scout, the other carrying a fortune. Inside the second, beneath a specially designed false floor, sat 186 kilograms of high-purity cocaine, carefully packed and hidden in reinforced drawers. The street value? £20 million. To passing drivers, it was just another van on the motorway. But to Cheshire police, it was the final piece of a puzzle they'd been quietly assembling for over a year. Above the road, a police helicopter tracked every move. On the ground, unmarked units formed a loose net, closing in slowly, methodically. There were no sirens. No shouting. Just a signal. Then, like a trapdoor snapping shut, the road was sealed. The convoy boxed in. And just like that, it was over. No high-speed chase. No shootout. Just calm, surgical precision. When officers cracked open the van, they didn't find a courier in a panic. They found Andrew Daniels, the driver, reeking of cider and fear. Too drunk to speak, too far gone to run. He had been drinking Strongbow during the trip, barely holding it together as he drove one of the most valuable illegal shipments in UK history. As investigators pried up the van's floor, they found what they'd been waiting for: block after block of cocaine, stacked, sealed, and ready for distribution. Each brick was a message. And that message was clear. This wasn't street-level crime. This was organized, national, and deeply embedded. The bust made headlines. But what the public didn't know yet was that this wasn't just a lucky catch. It was the culmination of Operation Dreadnought, a 14-month covert investigation built on wiretaps, financial tracing, phone dumps, and human error. every delivery, every safe house, every courier. And now, with this one move, both Oldroyd's ground crew and Simpson's transport line were exposed in the same breath. But what really broke the case wide open wasn't found in the van. It wasn't the drugs. It wasn't even the driver. It was the video. The one police already had in their hands. The one that turned a quiet case into an undeniable conviction. And what that video revealed about arrogance, money, and the people who thought they were untouchable. We'll get to that next. The drugs never made it home. The 20 million pounds in cocaine was gone in a single night. And when the dust settled, the people holding the bags weren't just couriers or street dealers. It was the suppliers. The men at the top. The ones who didn't get their hands dirty, but always got their cut. Alan and John Tobin weren't flashy. They didn't count cash on camera or flex in sports cars. But make no mistake, these brothers were among the most powerful cocaine suppliers in the UK. Their pipeline moved tons, not grams. And for years it ran smoothly, quietly, and without warning. Until the M6 bust. That single seizure wiped millions off their books overnight. It wasn't just a drug loss, it was a direct hit to their reputation. Because in their world, losing a shipment that size didn't just look sloppy. It looked weak. Jamie Oldroyd owed the Tobins an estimated £1.5 million, and after the bust he couldn't pay. Which meant someone had to answer for the damage. And someone had to bleed. In a leaked EncroChat message, Alan Tobin sent a chilling text about Oldroyd, coded but clear. "He's put me and our kid in this fing hole. I'll owe you the world, bro, carve the sea up." The message wasn't just anger. It was permission. And the person he sent it to? A mystery figure from Manchester. A man with his own score to settle. Someone who didn't just threaten, he followed through. And what followed in the weeks after that message? By the end of summer 2018, Jamie Oldroyd wasn't just a man under investigation. He was a man being hunted. The M6 bust had triggered more than headlines. It opened wounds in the underworld, deep, expensive wounds. 20 million pounds in lost product doesn't go unnoticed. And when someone like Oldroyd is blamed, it doesn't end with a conversation. August 2018. Just weeks after the seizure, gunshots rang out outside a quiet home in Warrington. The target? Oldroyd's parents' house. No warnings. No messages. Just bullets and brick. 3 months later in November the pressure escalated. A petrol bomb was hurled into his brother's sweet shop, a place where families bought snacks, now lit in flames. The blast didn't just destroy property. It sent a message loud enough for the whole town to hear. Someone wanted revenge. Then came the car compound, a storage lot filled with luxury Mercedes linked to Oldroyd's car business. Broken into. Smashed. Trashed. Every attack added another layer of fear. This wasn't random. This wasn't desperate. This was calculated. And according to police, the entire retaliation campaign was believed to be organized out of Merseyside, the same criminal circles Oldroyd once worked with, the same people he now owed. And when the violence refused to stop, police issued Osman letters, official warnings that someone's life was in immediate danger. Jamie Oldroyd, once surrounded by cash and cars, was now surrounded by enemies. The police were building a case. But his rivals were building something else. And the question wasn't whether they'd catch him. It was whether they'd get to him first. By the time the court dates were announced, the empire was already dead. The cocaine was gone. The gang's faces were splashed across every headline. Their secrets weren't just exposed. They were documented, photographed, itemized, and archived as evidence. One by one the dominoes fell. Jamie Oldroyd, the man who built the flashy front, flaunted the cash, and moved like a streetwise CEO, was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months behind bars. His supplier-turned-problem, Paul Ferraiolo, who once linked him to the Merseyside underworld, got 4.5 years. The Albanians, Paja and Grena, the car wash duo who played delivery men, got 6.5 and 7 years respectively. Police had found a video on Grena's phone of them with Oldroyd. It was never meant to be seen. Lewis Johnson, the quiet safe housekeeper on Liverpool Road, was sentenced to 9 years. Moses Weber, who helped coordinate the drug runs, earned 8 years. Then came the couriers drawn in by the illusion, Jordan Redfern and Elliot Otten, both from middle-class families with no criminal past. Paid between £150 to £500 per trip, they were promised quick money and status. Both got 5 years. The fallout didn't stop there. Claire Smith, who moved drugs cross-country and was supposed to get married just a week after the M6 bust, got 8 years and 9 months. Her fiancé, Jamie Winterburn, had helped launder £21,000 and was sentenced separately. Andrew Daniels, the drunk driver of the doomed van, got 8.5 years. He was pulled out of the vehicle in shame, his clothes soaked, his mind blurred, his name forever attached to the single most expensive drug slip-up in UK land-based history. And Jamie Simpson, the man behind the movement, the one who never shouted, never flashed, never got sloppy, was quietly handed 11.5 years. Altogether, the courts delivered a combined sentence of over 120 years across both gangs. From street runners to regional commanders, every layer of the operation was picked apart and pinned to the wall. What began as a celebration of fast money and control ended in a parade of mugshots, prison numbers and broken lives. But the true cost of empire wasn't just measured in years or lost profit. It was measured in paranoia, betrayal and silence. And for those who once ruled the cocaine pipeline from Merseyside to London, it turns out the only thing harder than building a drug empire is surviving it. The van was stopped on the M6 near Knutsford, but the real damage didn't hit there. It rippled hard, wide and fast through every level of the UK's underworld. Because what came next wasn't just about Jamie Oldroyd or Jamie Simpson. It wasn't even about the 186 kilos of cocaine stuffed under a false floor. It was about who else got caught in the collapse. At the very top of that list? Alan and John Tobin, the elusive brothers who supplied cocaine on an industrial scale, using encrypted apps, armored vehicles and layers of distance to shield themselves from exposure. For years they remained untouchable. But the M6 bust pulled a thread that unraveled everything. Within months, both were arrested, charged and handed down heavy sentences. Alan Tobin, 28 years. John Tobin, 22 years. The brothers who once dictated the UK's cocaine flow were now just prison numbers. But the fallout didn't end with arrests. In Warrington, a town already balancing between quiet suburbs and organised crime, old tensions began to resurface. The Cullen Gang, another known name in the area, was suddenly back on the radar. The streets had shifted. Alliances cracked. New players eyed the vacuum left behind. Even among police, the case marked something more than a win. It was a moment of reckoning. Detective Chief Inspector Mike Evans, the man who led Operation Dreadnought, summed it up plainly. Cheshire is and always will be a very difficult place to operate for organised crime. He wasn't wrong. Because the operation didn't just dismantle a network. It changed the rules. And left every gang from Liverpool to London wondering, who's watching us now? He had everything. 17 high-end cars. A car hire business that looked clean on paper. Cash-counting machines in his kitchen. Rolexes that flashed in Instagram-worthy lighting. Couriers at his command. Young men risking prison for a few £100 just to be part of the glow. Jamie Alvin, Oldroyd looked like he'd cracked the code. He played the role perfectly, entrepreneur by day, shadow operator by night. But behind the showroom smiles and staged success was a lie. A lie stacked on debt. A lie fed by desperation. A lie that made him believe he was in control, when he was never even close. Because while he counted cash in private, someone else was counting his mistakes. While he swapped burner phones, someone else was watching his routes. The truth is he was never the kingpin. He was a cog. A middleman. A pawn in a larger, bloodier machine run by men like the Tobins. Men who didn't need to show off because they already knew who they were. And once that machine started to break down, Alvin wasn't given a second chance. He was offered up. In the end, Alvin wasn't taken down by the police alone. It was the very underworld he fed that came to collect. If this story was valuable to you, don't forget to like and subscribe to Vault Crime for more underworld crime stories like this. See you in our next upload.